may have seen a few of these, but you kind of know what I've been doing the last few weeks, is creating continuous car drawings. So today we're going to do, this is number 299, and then we're doing 300 and 301. So all three are taxis. So you've got this one, and then you've got the more kind of well-known TX1, and then you've also got the latest electric cab as well.
They all sound very, very interesting. Are you going to struggle that they're just black? Is that going to be tricky? Because I know you love to throw a bit of extra colour on there.
Well, I'm sure I can get away with a bit of blue and a bit of purple and a bit of... Yeah, I can add a bit of colour in there as well. So these have been asked for by LEVC, who are the makers of the London Taxi, London Taxi, the TX as it is known, but the new electric version, which is built in Anstey, just up the road in Coventry here. But they're also building a van version, which I really like the idea of. I like the idea of trundling around in a van version of that. But we're going to start off with where it began, I believe, which is the Austin FX3. So I don't know if you've got any facts about it or anything you found out about taxis, but there is a whole Wikipedia page about it. So basically, it wasn't Austin, but then it became part of London Taxi Company in 2010. So they the Austin became the London Taxi Company. So there we are. But we're also going to talk about you and your car history. You're a car friend. So we're going to talk about what you do as well, and not just taxis. This is just so we can have a chat and I can draw something, basically. Introduce yourself. Let us know what you do, your job. And how we've got to know each other through various things, including the most recent Zoomers, which are on Monday. So, first of all, introduce yourself, let people know what you do, and then at some point we might have some... if people want to comment in the comments about taxis, I'm looking at my dad there, who I know is watching, he can then tell us about the taxi that I am drawing. So go ahead then, DCF1 off of the internet.
Yeah, very, very simply, I'm Damien Gross. Most people know me from Twitter. I obviously appear in various other places, but DC_F1 on Twitter. And that's probably where you and I first kind of got to know each other. Maybe it's through that, and then through various deals with brands that I work with. I work for a marketing agency called To The End. To The End are a content creation agency, and a few of our clients kind of cross over with the work that you do, because we've got a bit of a specialism in... automotive, motorsport, that kind of thing, as well as other things. I mean, we have clients, everything from steakhouses, sugar beet seed, waste management, all the way up to kind of, finance and TV channels. And along the way is Adrian Flux Insurance and Bike Shore, which is part of Adrian Flux. You've been involved with quite a lot, Ian, over the years.
Yeah.
And often, if Adrian Flux pops up in touring cars, which we are at the moment, although the season's not there, actually on real racetracks is still racing virtually. Adrian Flux often gets involved with the work that you're doing, commissioning pieces. You did a great piece of work for the boss of Adrian Flux at one point. Our paths have crossed quite a lot, but a lot of the time it is just me and you having some mutual interests on social media. We end up chatting in the same conversations. And so when I put out this quite flippant tweet at one point to say, who fancies a quick Zoom call, all those kind of motoring types. A few people put their hands up, and it quickly became a real thing. So you were obviously involved in that. We've got a few race drivers in there, like Charlie Martin, Toby Trice. We've got a few PR people in there. We've got Naomi Panther, Jess Shanahan, for example, Alan Bradley, Motoring Podcast, and a few other guys, writers. We've got some young up-and-coming motorsport writers like Chris Sharp, who's also running Racing Pride, the LGBTQ awareness brand. We've got Craig Woolard, who's not only written things for Adrian Flux and Influx magazine, part of the Flux brands. He's also a motorsport historian and is privileged, I think, to be able to go into the archives 100 or so years ago and see these kind of images that no one's ever seen before. that's fascinating. There's loads of other people on Zoom Zoomers that I don't want to miss out, so I'll try and not list everybody before I miss one person and they get upset that they didn't get the mention. But yeah, Zoom Zoomers is now, we're broadcasting live on YouTube 8 p.m. on Mondays, and it's going down really well. Really, it's a bit of fun for us guys. We did some games on there. You missed out this week, Ian. You had some dodgy internet. You missed out some great stuff.
My internet is rubbish. Rubbish.
But we tried a few new things. One was a quick fire agree or disagree round, so that went down quite well. There was the wheel of track day owned scrap, which was great, where the wheel threw up 3 random sporty cars for people, and then each person would have to decide which one they'd scrap, and of the other 2 own one and track day one. So yeah, I think you missed out on that bit. And also we had on the quick fire questions. Actually, I don't know if you've had a chance. You probably haven't. You haven't had a chance to see question number 12 of the quick fire ones, because it actually involved you, and we were hoping you were going to be present.
Oh, sorry. What was it?
Yeah, it was you basically the people on the Zoom call had to hold up a green object if they agreed, a red one if they disagreed. Now, it was unanimously green on this one, and it was, should Ian Cook draw Chris Sharp's 2016 Astra? Now, this cropped up in a previous Zoom was where Chris kind of put you on the spot somewhat and wanted to get his car in your current project. Now, there's not really enough room for it, I guess, because 300 was quite a nice target. You're sort of already there, and you've got plenty of backup, but nonetheless, we were hoping to put you on the spot once again and try and get you to perhaps do a quick doodle at some point for Chris's lovely, ordinary car.
As you asked so nicely, and you're such a you are a profound Twitterer, and you're a person, you're a nice person who's always smiling. I put you on the spot when I said, right, we're going to draw a taxi, and it's going to be this one. And you went, oh, okay. So.
Okay. Yeah, the guy that you know as the Lotus guy. The only brand of car, I've owned a lot of cars over the years, the only brand I've had more than once is Lotus.
Well, interesting enough,
let's talk about taxis.
But Lotus, LEVC, owned by the same company, I believe.
All right, there we go. Yeah, okay, there's some sort of tangible way of, some sort of weird link.
Look, there you are. There's the beginnings of a black cab, or an Austin.
It looks like Brum.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Brum went.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's not a criticism. That's kind of cool. It's just, if it was yellow, it'd be brilliant. But no, we need to make it black and sinister and gangster.
Exactly.
These old taxis from I think this was 48 to 58, if Google serves me correctly. This era looks like it is proper gangster, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, you can imagine like people hanging out the back of it, like wanting some money.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of what taxis are about, I guess. But yeah, it was good. So that's kind of covered Zoom Zoomers. If anyone wants to try and find out a bit more about it, it's on. There is a Facebook page, but that's because originally we thought we'd pop it over to Facebook. Worked out a lot better to put it onto YouTube. So if you find your way over to Facebook, you won't see a lot there. You're better off just going to YouTube, finding Zoom Zoomers, or on Twitter at Zoom Zoomers. That's probably where we all kind of hang around and actually put a load of the stuff. So you'll see me, Ian, a load of other people that I mentioned before. We're also getting special guests in each week. So hopefully as time goes on, maybe we can start to bring in some familiar faces for you. So I've reached out to a few people. I like to try and keep it a surprise if I can. I've got a note here. I don't know if you can see this, Ian, or if you've got the
I can't, but you can.
I can. So it says, the Cooks of Brum has left a note here. It says, 1948 Austin FX3, built by car bodies of Golf, created the template for the familiar London taxi. There you go. What a precedent they set. What they're responsible for. It's fantastic to know that design really has kind of stood for 70 years. So it obviously nailed the brief early on.
So in terms of your car history, what is it peppered with?
It's one extreme to the other. Like I said, I think as long as you love your car, then that's fantastic. And I tend to go from sporty to very sensible, back to sporty, and that kind of thing. Because generally, if I go to sporty and I've got a Lotus, there's no point in trying to get another sports car, because in the past I've driven lots of things, and you know, as all these kind of brands that you think were sporty, you know, BMW, that kind of thing, they just never hit the same spots as a Lotus does. So once I've had that, and then I think, right, I need to get something sensible again, I'll then flip. So at the moment I have a Jaguar XF diesel estate, which is actually pretty amazing, and it's not the sort of car that people would normally associate me with, but I quite like it. Obviously, since I bought one. And it looks really smart, but it's big enough for me to get bikes in the back, because I do a few, I don't know if you see medals, I do triathlons and that kind of thing. There's a wetsuit there.
I love how you just casually dropped it in there. Obviously, I do triathlons.
I don't know if you've noticed. Hang on, let me spin around that way and you can see my karting medals, karting trophies. There's a couple of championship ones up there.
Oh.
Yeah, so I like to get the bikes in the back without having to dismantle them all. So when I had the Exige, I also had a Berlingo van, which was great, but it was 10 years old and French, and it was always something slightly different that wouldn't work every time we got in it. It might be the reverse sensors, it might be the radio, it might be the air vents. One time I had to drive to Donington for a BTCC media day. At about 4 a.m. I left Norfolk with a couple of colleagues in the car, and the window demister just didn't work, so we were kind of having to try and cope with that as best we could, and then it suddenly started working on the way home, and then the radio stopped working. So as fun as it was to have that van, I think it was never gonna satisfy my need to have, you know, everyday transport. So when I painfully sold the Lotus Exige, crying as it left, I also sold the van and then got an estate car. So that's where I am right now. But going back over the years, I've had other sports cars, as well as Lotus. Had a Mazda MX-5, which actually, you know, people can diss them all they want. They're actually fantastic. I had a 1.8 IS, a Mark II with limited slip differential, and it was an absolute hoot. I also had a Smart Roadster. Again, people like to say they're a bit rubbish. Not the fastest, but it doesn't really matter because it's just fun and you're low down to the ground, all that kind of thing. And Gordon Murray had one. And right, if it's good enough for Gordon Murray, it's good enough for me. And I saw something the way he'd said that there's no point in getting the Brabus version because you don't really need the power. So I was like, okay, cool. If it's good enough for him, I just got the basic version. And that was a bit of a hoot. Again, not a lot of space. So they're the kind of sporty cars I've had over the years, two-seater sports cars, generally rear-wheel drive. I have tried BMW. I had a BMW 330 Ci Coupe. E46 probably, I think that sounds about right. That was quite frustrating as someone who actually really likes to drive it properly because it had a slight delay and a fly-by-wire throttle. And when you need that instant response, it just didn't give it to you the same way as having a cable that pulls a throttle open. So that was a bit disappointing. But as well as that, I've had fairly sensible cars. I've had a Saab estate. You know, if you're going to have an estate, it's not like me to just go and get a Vauxhall. So I got a Saab, and I was really, really happy with that.
Was that the Saab 9.5, was that, or?
That was a 9.3, so people would quite happily tell me it was a Vectra, and I go, yeah, okay, because I can't be asked for that argument, really. But that was really good. You know, it had a lot of mod cons on it, and I still see it driving around now, because that was about 10 years ago I sold that, and it disappeared somewhere in the country, but weirdly, there's someone nearby who's got it again. So I see the number plate every now and again and try not to stare at him because he's probably going, that's that bloke again who always stares at me when I drive past. But that's still going. That's quite nice to see. But in the early days, I mean, I'm going to go back to a little bit of history about me. I grew up in a family of car lovers. My dad was a mechanic, and he always said to me, oh, you've got a brain on you, don't get your hands dirty. So I was never allowed to touch the cars or the tools or anything. He just wanted me to do some maths. So I just basically did that. I still loved cars, though. I'd sit at the top of the stairs looking out the window because the A47 passed the landing window, and I'd identify cars as they were coming past when I was about 6 years old. It'd be like, oh, there's a Sierra, and then there's like, oh, you know, a Triumph or something like that. So it was early on that I got into cars. But then as I grew up, and we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but we got, one thing I was lucky about is because Dad progressed through being a mechanic to then running an MOT garage, there would occasionally be cars that he received as trade-ins when he was selling cars that he couldn't bear to put on the forecourt.
Right.
Now, that meant that Damien was probably going to have them, no matter what state they were in. So I started my car journey after I kind of learned to drive in a nice Ford Fiesta with a wooden dash.
Nice.
I then had an old Fiat Uno, which the engine was literally held together with some washing line. Not something my dad did, all the mechanics there, just he kind of got it in as a trade-in and didn't ever bother to fix it. He just let Damien have it. So that was fun. I had to call out roadside recovery a few times for that. When that finally died, I then had an old Nova with 3-spoke wheels that I used to commute from Norfolk to Coventry, because I went to uni in Coventry. You know quite well, coming off the M6, there's kind of like this kind of slip road where you go off and then you come up to a roundabout. Inevitably, as I was coming up to that roundabout, steam would come out of the bonnet, because that was the limit of what the Vauxhall could take coming from Norfolk to Coventry. So I always used to have to carry a bottle of water with me there.
So what course did you do in Coventry?
Automotive design.
Okay.
I was a physics geek at school. You know, my dad, like I said, my dad always wanted me to just do maths because he realised I had a bit of a passion for it. Combined with cars and then motorsport, you know, in the days of Ayrton Senna, I got really into McLaren when he was driving for McLaren. And then combining, I had a bit of a talent for physics. You quite easily got, you know, an A at A level and that kind of thing. And I used to stick around as a proper geek. I used to stick around after school to chat about aerodynamics with the physics teacher. And we were talking about boundary layers and drag coefficients and all this kind of thing. And how that applied to motorsport. Adrian Newey was starting to become really well recognised in those days as well. So I was like, right, that's what I want to do. I want to go and use my knowledge of aerodynamics and that kind of thing to do race cars. So I signed up for an automotive engineering course, but that was the wrong thing to do. I found myself at Tile Hill College, you probably know, and there was we were making, say, carburettors, you know, on a lathe from a block of aluminium, and I was going, this isn't kind of what I think I wanted to do. So I had a chat with the course tutors and said, look, this is kind of where I wanted to head, and they went, yeah, okay, I see what's happened here. What you need to do if you want to apply aerodynamics to cars is do an aeronautical design course. Go and design some aeroplanes, and then take that knowledge and apply it to cars. Right, okay, so, you know, we'll quit that there. So I decided in the meantime to go get a job to kind of tide me over, and I got a job at Adrian Flux Insurance, which actually turned out to be all right, because I started there, did quite well there, worked my way up in the end, didn't bother going back to university to do the aeronautical course, and that got me into the marketing company that I'm with now, where Adrian Flux is one of the customers. And of course, knowing what I know about Flux, and also knowing what I know about motorsport and the car industry, has helped us out quite a lot. So that kind of worked out really, really well.
So you've been able to continue your passion of motorsport and engineering and all that, but actually apply it in a kind of more marketing, story-led way, I'd say.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you and I have worked on a few things in the past, and I've produced videos that you've been in with. We went to the BMR team headquarters last year, which was quite a fun video to do with Ash Stone and Senna Proctor. And so you can kind of see me kind of directing that and behind the scenes kind of getting the story together, because I feel like I am kind of a bit of a storyteller, a bit of a creator of things, as well as, you know, passionate about cars and that. In terms of engineering, I don't know if that was ever going to be the right thing for me to do. You know, I'm not that hands-on. When I used to go go-karting, they'd call me lady hands, because my hands would blister after about 10 laps because they were just so soft. Hangover from dad not letting me touch anything. But also, for some of you who probably won't know, I've got a blood condition called haemophilia. And that means that at school, I bruise really, really easily. So at school, I wouldn't be allowed to play rugby, hockey, cricket, anything like that in case I bruised. So I just run around the field. That's turned out to be really, really handy when I'm trying to do triathlons. But in terms of having man hands, no, because I've never actually done anything with them. So it's kind of set me off on this weird path in life where I have quite a well-established set of legs, but my hands are rubbish. But I can't remember what I was talking about now, but the engineering side of things was never really going to be me. Mum always used to say, you know, before I got diagnosed with haemophilia and knew that I shouldn't be having contact and that kind of thing. Mum always used to say it was like I knew subconsciously, because I'd rather be sat in my bedroom reading a book than going out climbing trees with my friends. So it kind of worked out okay. But in later life, the haemophilia thing's quite tricky to kind of get around, because it doesn't affect me in day-to-day life at all. As long as I don't go and play rugby, I'm fine. But it does mean that I'm not supposed to play any sports, which is tricky when you need a race license, for example, for motorsport. That's why I do go-kart and I do track days. I've done a few bits of test driving. There's a few videos out there of me driving a few different vehicles, but in terms of getting a race license, it's not really an option for me. So that's something that I've had to kind of take on the chin. And especially over this last month, because I've had a few race drivers come back to me and go, Damien, why aren't you getting involved with the esports? It's an absolute no-brainer for you. Yeah, if I had a sim like you guys, but I can't really justify having it, because I don't want to do it half-hearted either.
Yeah.
So if I had the space and the money to buy a lovely sim, then I'd get on it, and I'd think I'd really, really enjoy that, because it'd give me that racing fix without needing to get the race license. So that would be fun. But it's something that you kind of come to terms with, when you are a haemophiliac, that you kind of, it doesn't affect you generally day to day, but there are just things that you can't do because you're labelled like that, which is a bit of a shame.
So did that, during school and stuff, did that affect how you did things, or was it, you just kind of, were the school supportive of it? How did that go?
The school were fascinated by it. I went to a school in Wisbech, which isn't a very big town. So I didn't know I was a haemophiliac until I went to high school. So where I was, it was a primary school, secondary school system. So during primary school, nobody knew that I was a haemophiliac. I didn't know. We just thought that I bruised easily. When I went to high school, my mum decided to kind of get me tested for something, because it was a bit weird how often I was getting bruises before I started to play rugby and that kind of thing. So within a week of being at high school, I knew that I was a haemophiliac, and the doctor, it was quite weird because the doctor celebrated it was the first time he'd had a haemophiliac. It's quite a rare thing. But the school were really good. The PE guys, although the PE team, although they, it was annoying for them, I guess, to have this guy who couldn't take part. They would do anything they could to try and help me out to keep fit, and I ended up, because I was running so much, I was fairly good at running anyway at primary school, but when I started at high school, I was running so much, I ended up representing the school for the 1500 metres and doing okay at that. I generally come in the top 3, so that's the kind of legacy that I've been left with these fairly well-developed legs for cycling and running. I'm not so good at the swimming. But the school, they couldn't really have been much more helpful, really, when it's sort of out of their hands. And I really appreciate the fact that they were so kind, and the people around me, the students at school were brilliant about it. They knew me as the guy who runs, and were always supporting me on that. And always, they would never, mock me or take the mickey out of me, because it wasn't in their nature. They would generally kind of feel a bit like sorry for me, but then support me as I was running around. So if they were playing rugby and I was running around the pitch, as soon as they clocked me, they'd give me a wave and a thumbs up and go on, son, and that kind of thing. So yeah, that was good. Yeah, they're good days, really.
You've certainly embraced social media and how it works, and Twitter and whatnot. So how, obviously that's part of your job, but also you seem pretty natural at it. You enjoy it. You enjoy that kind of chatting to people. So over the last few years, how's that advanced, and how's that benefited you essentially?
Yeah, it was quite a thing. I've just seen a lady, Jen Renacle, I think, is just appeared. Now, Jenny, it's a very, very apt time for her to appear, because I wasn't on social media until Jen decided that I should get a girlfriend. And then she set me up a Facebook account and told me I'm on Facebook now. So I was like, oh, okay. So I kind of did that, set up a Twitter account, and that's where I started. And I found Twitter fascinating, because I could kind of put my thoughts out there and my witty comebacks and that kind of thing, and it works quite well, especially when I was watching the Grand Prix. And I soon kind of got the knack of trying to get engagement off that. And that really opened the door then for when I did then go for the job to the end, which was known as Maze Media at the time. Maze Media now is kind of a separate part of the same group, because as the group grew and grew and grew, it became specialists in different areas. So when I went for that job, it was kind of, it was really, really handy for me to say, oh, I've got like 1,000 Twitter followers already, because this was the early days of Twitter. And then that kind of got my confidence back about being kind of that character, because it's a bit of an act, you know, you have to put on. For someone, I've actually, like I said before, when I was a kid, I used to sit at home quite happily reading a book in my own little world, put the Mega Drive on, play a bit of Sonic the Hedgehog. And that was me, you know. I think people at primary school probably be surprised about how much I can just talk about nothing now. But I've kind of trained myself to do it and taught myself about it. And it was quite nice when I was promoting a charity event that I set up called Lap of Anglia, which was cycling 400 miles in 4 days for the local air ambulance. I was talking about that on a local radio, and as they then kind of cut me off at the end of it, they went, "Oh, you're a natural talker." I was like, "Oh wow, okay, I'll take that on board." And that was a massive confidence boost for me. And then the more you're on camera, do this kind of thing, and seeing yourself, hearing yourself back, the more you get over that cringy side of things. When you first see yourself, you go, "Oh God, is that really what I look like? Is that really what I sound like?" And now I embrace it. I kind of really like it. I produced a video for some tips for local businesses as part of To The End. As I said, I gave 10 top tips, and number 7 was about embarrassment. When you're on video, looking back, and that everybody feels uncomfortable when they watch themselves back on screen. So just embrace that. It will happen. If you just ignore it, then don't worry about it. Nobody else will criticise you. And it's really good to see people responding to that. One of the Zoomers, and the guys I mentioned earlier, Toby Trice, he put out a video on LinkedIn, Twitter, that kind of thing the other day, and I've seen he's got the same microphone that I suggested, and he did get in touch with some more tips, and it's really nice to think people are now getting tips from me about this kind of thing. So yeah, it's been quite fun. It's been nice to be able to use it as part of my job. And every time you put any kind of post out there on any network, it's a way of learning. Sometimes you think, "Oh, this is going to go viral." You put it out there, it completely flops. You go, "Oh, okay." And sometimes you'll put something out there which is quite funny, but because the timing is spot on, or it's a slightly strange angle to put on something, it does really, really well. I always like to say, go for the third thing that you think of, because if I'm watching a Grand Prix and Grosjean hits a wall, which will often happen, if you say, "Oh, Grosjean's hit the wall," obviously no one's going to respond to that. If you put another spin on it, then people go, "Oh, that's quite clever," but other people might have thought of it. So I always go for the third thing, because I dismiss the first couple of things that jump into your head. And if you can get to that third thing within about 10 seconds, and you could be the first person to put that out on social media, that's the one that everyone latches onto. So that's kind of served me well.
So can you remember any like ones that particularly went viral, or were particularly good, or?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to remember exact numbers, but I remember when the moment that Rosberg said that he was retiring after he won the World Championship, like very soon after winning the World Championship, he said he's retiring. I very quickly went on, found a stock image of a massive queue, stuck a Mercedes badge at the front of it, and just said, "This is the queue outside Toto Wolff's office right now." And that ended up with like 1,000 likes and retweets and that kind of thing. So it's just getting in there before everyone else does.
That's yeah. So is F1, like in terms of F1, is that your thing? Is that I mean, obviously you do touring cars, but has that always been the main kind of motorsports interest for you?
Yeah, definitely. It was growing up, that was the only thing. Well, that and touring cars you saw on the TV a lot, but as I mentioned earlier on about the aerodynamics, you don't really get too much of that in touring cars, whereas in Formula One, they're really pushing the limits with it, especially the Lotus guys back in the day with ground effect and that kind of thing. So Formula One was always a big thing. But I don't dismiss any motorsport. I quite happily, when I first learned to drive, I'd go down to Snetterton, around the back end of Snetterton, just to see what was going on, and hope that I wasn't being asked to leave by some security guards, find my way in, and I would go down there and there might be like a Dodge Viper GT2 testing or something like that, and it's, all right, just get my fix there before then going home. And that was just like worth the trip out for, a 4-hour round trip to get half an hour of this Viper going round. So I've always enjoyed motorsport. I've always enjoyed kind of racing games as well, and they've come on in leaps and bounds. At the moment, I haven't got anything. I've got an old PS3 in the loft and an old set of steering wheel and pedals, but I haven't got a PS4 and my PC that I've got at the moment isn't capable of running something like iRacing, which is a bit of a shame because I'd love to get involved in it, but as I say, I kind of perhaps to like to do it in a proper way again, and perhaps start a YouTube channel, that kind of thing, but I just haven't got the time. A lot of what I do for work, I'm still working, by the way, not furloughed, I work from home, so I'm still working as much as ever, trying to get out even more content than normal for our clients, and that leaves very little time to do stuff off your own back, especially when I do things on social media like the Zoom Zoomers, which is, a bit of fun. But I think, Formula One is probably the one that I'd always go back to. If all motorsport was on TV at the same time and I couldn't get to a track, I would put the Formula One on. I know some people will say, yeah, but it's boring, it's just, there's no overtaking, that kind of thing. And it has sort of always been that way. Remember the Trulli days where people just sit behind Trulli for an hour and a half. Yeah. And it comes and goes. Everyone remembers the good times. I mean, any era of Formula One, as you can criticise, you look about how far back people were in the mid-90s. The 40 team, for example, would get that 3 or 4 times. And that would just be ridiculous nowadays to think. That's before they put in the 107% rule that stopped people being really rubbish at it. So it's actually really, really close now, apart from, it's hard to say whether the cars are easier to drive. I mean, I think we all suspect they are, but we're not qualified to say that without actually having a go. But it does seem like it's easy to kind of drive at the limit of the car. You've got so much data coming at you that you can kind of, you know what's going on. There's so much information about it compared to the old days. And that means that inevitably the quick cars stay at the front. It's the flaw of motorsport in one regard, where you have a session to determine who's the fastest guy, and they go, brilliant, let's put them at the front. That's kind of a bit of a weird way of doing it. You wouldn't say in football, wow, they're right at the top of the league, let's give them a 2-goal head start for this match against the guys at the bottom of the league. Yeah. There's not really any ways of getting around that, because of course if you did a reverse grid, everyone would just drive slowly. So mixing up qualifying is always good, and I think they've got a decent format in Formula 1 at the moment. I've tried different formats over the years, of course, but I think it's just a bit of a fundamental flaw in motorsport that you put the fastest guy at the front, then nobody overtakes them. If it was easy to make mistakes in these cars, which we see with variable weather, so that's always quite welcome, then it makes the races more interesting to the general public. I still get a kick out of watching Formula 1, even when no one's overtaken. Just that single car on track, looking at what they're doing, how they're managing to, how they're negotiating the track, what their line is different from other people, how the attitude of the car changes, all that kind of thing. That still gets me excited. So I'm not too worried about all the action. I've never been one to enjoy the crashes. I always feel a bit nervous about the crashes, maybe because I've come from, a karting background and having been through tyre barriers myself, and know that even that hurts at 40 mile an hour, let alone 140 or beyond. Yeah. So I've never been one of these to go, I just watch it for the crashes, and I kind of get why people do, and although I don't agree with it at all, it's like, okay, I kind of get that. That's perhaps where you're getting your entertainment from. But for me, it is everything about it: the technology, the materials, the drivers, and it's nice to have a few personalities in there. I think you don't have to be over the top as a character to be a good personality in Formula 1. We see news coming out that McLaren are going to have 2 proper characters in 2021 with Danny Ricciardo and Lando Norris.
This week has been bizarre in terms of, like, there is no racing going on, but then it's all like, it's like the drivers there's a merry-go-round of drivers.
Yeah, I suppose inevitably they have to get their 2021 contract sorted. So it's now this weird situation where press releases are coming out and Zach Brown saying thank you for your hard work, Carlos, and good luck for the future. But then you think, well, if he's still going to be racing this year, he's still got a part season that, a truncated season to do for you. Yeah. So it's a bit of a funny one. But I guess this is the time that you get next year's contract sorted. It always has been. It's a bit of a weird one. But I was ready to really dislike all the esports and that kind of thing. But I've I'm kind of okay with it. I think that when you see real drivers really getting involved, I wasn't so keen on when they did the Bahrain Grand Prix at the start, and Lando was glitching and there weren't really many recognisable names in there. But then when I watched the race do the Legends series, we had Jenson Button, we had, I can't remember who was in there, Plato, Fittipaldi, and all these guys racing, and it was like, actually, I really, really like that. And then we see it with the Race at Home challenge that Charlie Martin and a few guys are taking part in, and the actual Formula E grid of drivers themselves take part in a race altogether, and they're getting points and that kind of thing. So that was actually quite interesting. But then Charlie, although she's a race driver, she's been put in against sim racers, and that's a bit harsh because the sim racers know sim racing really, really well, and so she's quite new to it. So it's good to see that she can kind of hold her own, even though she's very unlikely to get up into the podium positions. But I've actually quite enjoyed watching it. I think we're just lucky enough to be for technology to be in a place where it's possible, where the internet's secure enough and stable enough, and the graphics and realism of these sim-based racing games is good enough for it to actually feel like you're actually at a race. And being a good driver actually does help out, although there are those subtle nuances about sim racing that the likes of Plato and Callum Eilert is another guy who Adrian Flux support. He'll be racing as well. I saw it's live now. He's got a new livery for his online racing. So Callum Eilert, if nobody knows, is a Formula 2 racer backed by the Ferrari Driver Academy, and he's backed by Adrian Flux, and I've seen the car that he's going to be racing in for the NHS, Race for the NHS, I think is the hashtag. And it looks really, really cool. And to know people like that are kind of on board with it all is really, really, really good as well. And it's been a real boon for the esports industry and sim racing. And if you try and get sim equipment at the moment, it's really, really hard. I spoke to a few guys and they said, just check on Facebook forums, that kind of thing, if you want sim equipment. But the stuff secondhand is going for what it goes for new anyway. It's just you can't get it new anywhere. So it really has been a boon for the sim racing industry.
A fun fact about Callum Eilert is that he drove my Morgan at the Coventry Motorfest.
Did he?
Yeah, and I remember being in it, going, I don't know, I'd never normally hand over the keys to that car to anybody. And he was like, I was like, well, he's a pro racer. I was like, I've never been so scared and excited in equal measure of somebody pushing that car to the absolute limit.
Were you in the car?
What's that, sorry?
Were you in the car?
Yeah, I was in the passenger seat. Yeah. So I was in passenger, and he was driving it, and he was unbelievable in it.
Oh, brilliant! I'm glad that he's having fun as well. He's quite. I don't know if you'll mind me saying it. I think he's quite a shy chap naturally, and I think he's someone who's perhaps starting to come out of his shell a bit more. And he is a character. He is fun. Yeah,
he certainly enjoyed the Morgan. So the other thing that we recently, when I was doing the art thing with you, you've had the Pass the Picasso for a bit, didn't you, as well?
Yeah. This cropped up on Zoomers on Monday, and the story of the Pass the Picasso. So Ash Winston from Palmdale Motors was trying to get an old Picasso up to 500,000 miles. And was asking for people to help out, so we were taking it in turns to borrow it, and this is well before lockdown. So we were, any journey that I needed to do that was long distance, I'd use the Picasso for. So I went down to, I think it's Middlesex where they are, grabbed it, and just getting back to Norfolk, put a load of miles on it, and it's in incredible condition, this car. But a few days later is then when we did the video with the BMR guys. So I came down. In the Picasso with a couple of colleagues, and while we were there, Ash Winston had said, let Ian put some art on it or something like that. So I was like, yeah, that's cool. I'll perhaps get the touring car boys to put a bit of a stamp on it as well. So at the end of the day, we were running a bit behind, and I know that you were quite keen to get things wrapped up. I was very insistent that you should come and put your mark on the Pass the Picasso, and so you went around the car with orange paint all over your hands, stamping it all over, which in itself would have been fantastic. However, what had also happened was, whilst you were doing that, you'd popped a pot of paint on the windscreen. Now, Ash Sutton wanted to update the mileage on the side of the car because we kept a running total on the side with a Sharpie. And so in order to see what the current mileage was on the car, you had to nip in, put the ignition on. And of course, as soon as you put the ignition on, the window wipers went because it had been raining that morning and I'd left them on. And the window wiper went with this pot of orange paint all over the windscreen. So we frantically tried to wash it off as best we could, but we had to get back as well. And so as soon as it was road legal, let's say, if not exactly aesthetically pleasing, we kind of trundled home with orange paint over the car. And I managed to get most of it off the windows when I got home. But a load of it had gone over the paintwork and everything as well. I thought, you know what, let's just call it a Pop Bang Colour special. Inside the car, Senna Proctor had written his and Ash Sutton's initials, which to begin with was a good idea, but then he got SPAS written across the dashboard, which, taken out of context, doesn't really mean a lot. So that was there. And when I took it back to Palmdale, Ash wasn't there. One of his colleagues kind of took it in and looked at me and was like, okay. Right, okay. And I think they kind of left it for a little while, but then they couldn't resist just getting all the paint off it again. But I've got plenty of pictures of it with all the exclusive Pop Bang a la carte artwork on it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you called it the Picasso. Was it Picasso that you called it?
Yeah, Picasso, yeah, something like that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, all good fun.
Right, so going back to the taxi, we are pretty much there. So during lockdown, what you been? So you just been operating as normal? What's been the?
Yeah, it's operating as normal. It's luckily I can work from home, so it's been busy. It's been normal work plus extra because of all the extra stuff that we need to do to produce content related to lockdown, keep people updated on what's going on in these companies. So it has been really busy, but I did actually take some time off because I thought we need to take holiday at some point and we can't all take it when we come out of lockdown. So I took a few days off and did a video of Janet the dog, who you might have seen earlier, doing a bit of a challenge where she had to go and retrieve toys from a pool, which sounds really boring, but actually it was quite a lot of fun for me and my wife to do. As we acted like a commentary team as she was doing this. That was quite fun. But loads of ideas that I've kind of come up with. I just haven't got the time or money to sort them out. But Zoom actually keeps me quite busy because producing things like last week we had the track day owned scrap wheel, sourcing the images for that kind of thing just keeps you busy. You don't get anything out of it, financially, obviously. Apart from it's just really good fun and it's really nice. And I've seen a couple of the guys there saying how much they look forward to it. And for those of them out there who are furloughed at the moment, it's really nice to give them something to look forward to doing.
Yeah, totally.
And I think it'll probably end up surviving beyond the lockdown. I think the beauty of having a core of about 15, 16 of us, but not needing to have that many, means that if 1 week 12 people are there, that's still fine. If 1 week all 16, that's fine. If people need to nip in and out, if they can only do half an hour, that's fine. So it kind of, although we've got these running themes and these kind of features that we're going to be doing, like we do an F1 quiz where the questions are written by a 9-year-old and are impossible. But those kind of things can continue, and it's not reliant on everyone having to be present. So I think hopefully it's the start of something that'll be really, really interesting and months and perhaps years to come if we can get more and more special guests to come in on that. So that'll keep me busy as well. But general day-to-day life hasn't changed a lot for me apart from I'm not going to work. And work for me would typically be in town, which is about 2.5 miles away. And normally I'd either walk, cycle or run to work and back, which I've not been able to do. So it's kind of my step count has been a lot lower than normal. But now that I can do more than one form of exercise a day, that's quite handy because I would have had to choose either walking the dog or going for a run or a bike ride. But now I can walk the dog and still go for a run. So hopefully my fitness isn't going to be as diabolical as it would have been otherwise.
Or you could take a taxi if you wanted to.
I could take what a fantastic taxi. That's amazing.
There
How
we
was that
are.
taking you? 45 minutes?
There we are. So thank you so much, mate, for being
No
part
worries.
of that creation.
That looks fantastic.
So that's
So that's number 299.
That's 299. Yep. So the next one is going to be. We're actually going to go with the electric next. So we're going to do
Nice.
we're going to do the oldest one, then the newest one, and then I've got a film coming on to do about this as well.